Hi everyone, my name is Amy Minix and I'm joined by my colleague Shannon Sipes, and today we're going to be talking about how we are mentoring SoTL scholars in and through an international collaborative writing group based faculty learning community. A lot of acronyms there. We're going to add some definitions and kind of talk through our process a little bit today. So I'm Amy Minix. I'm a neurohealth sciences librarian at Indiana University in Bloomington. It is lunchtime here, for those of you who are curious how the time zones work. And I'm joined by Shannon Sipes, who is the SoTL Program Director and Lead Instructional Consultant in the Teaching and Learning Center, also at Indiana University Bloomington. And just a quick overview of our session today. So we're going to cover kind of the nuts and bolts in becoming a SoTL scholar, what some of those challenges are, and particularly thinking about the 2020-2021 academic year. We're going to share a case study of our FLC, which is based on an international collaborative writing group. And then we'll share our key takeaways, which will hopefully inspire or give some food for thought for you all as you think about programming or unique challenges that this past year and a half have brought us all. So I'm going to turn things over to Shannon to talk about becoming a SoTL scholar.
Thanks, Amy. And you have control of the slides, so I will just at some point ask you to change them. So the way that this came about was the way I think all great SoTL projects come about, where you're just chatting with a friend over coffee, in this case virtually, and catching up. Amy was my graduate student a few years ago, and now she's a full-time librarian, and so it's sometimes fun just to sit and chat and have coffee or lunch. And as we were talking, we were talking about her role as a librarian and my role as a faculty developer, and sort of like where some of these questions come up or what we've been working on. And for novice SoTL scholars, we realized that some of the challenges, which are probably not a surprise, are, just figuring out where to even start when you want to start a SoTL project. Where do you find articles and literature? Once you find those, how do you design a study, particularly if you are not from a social science background? If you do a study or you collect some data, who is even going to look at that? What's the audience? Where does it count in terms of promotion? Is it research? Is it teaching? Does your department value it? Does anyone want to read it? And how do you connect with someone who knows what they're doing to mentor you and help you work through your desire to become more involved in SoTL? And part of this, is the fact that SoTL is so interdisciplinary. Trained as disciplinarians, right, we tend to approach things from our own fields, and that's just not the way that SoTL works. And so trying to find the community and the audience and the people doing this or even interested in it can be a challenge for novices. Okay. Thank you, Amy. And so one way that we typically help people become introduced to a field, SoTL or not SoTL, in academic development is through faculty learning communities, which is what we tend to refer to them as in the States. They might be referred to as community of practice somewhere else. And so we're going to use the term FLC in our presentation. But you might think of it as some other collaborative group, and that's fine. So traditionally, an FLC is a small interdisciplinary group of faculty who work together over an extended period of time, often an academic year, in an active collaborative way to enhance their own teaching or their students' learning. Right, so that's sort of the structure of the group and the purpose. They can work around either a topic or around a cohort. So maybe they're looking at something like a specific pedagogy, or maybe they're arranged by being new faculty, so first-year instructors. And then the level of structure in these varies. Something from very structured that the facilitator lines out and works faculty through as a class, or it can be very organic and unstructured and the group just builds it as they go along. Okay, Amy? And so this is a type of programming that I do every year. I do multiple FLCs, and going into the last academic year, we had some different constraints. Our campus was completely virtual. All of the staff worked from home for 18 months. Courses went virtual, students weren't on campus, and then they were at different levels, right? We were going with a global pandemic and all of the challenges and bandwidth that brings. And then significantly decreased budgets. So thinking about then how we were going to do these FLCs, we lost our in-person meetings, so we had to think about how to do that virtually. We typically fund our FLCs. We give faculty members a small stipend. That went away, so that carrot was gone within the decreased budget. Classes were very fluid. Faculty didn't know how they were teaching, where they were teaching. They were trying to learn to teach in new formats. They may not have had the capacity to add something new, right? And so we were trying to think of, well, how are we going to continue offering programming and supporting faculty under all of these different constraints? So next slide, please. So then I was thinking about the ICWG model from ISSOTL, the International Collaborative Writing Groups. And this is something that ISSOTL has done 3 times in the past, and I had the privilege of participating in the last version of it. And it offers a really great model, particularly for sort of the space we have all been in for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. And there are small interdisciplinary groups of academics, so not just faculty, who work together collaboratively over about 18 months to write a manuscript on something SoTL. And it's built in virtual components as well as on-ground, face-to-face, in the same room components. So a mix of virtual and residential. And the groups are focused topically, and they're intentionally designed to be very diverse with a range of backgrounds and interests. And so this offered, there's a lot of parallels with the faculty learning community in the goal and the structure of the group, but it offered a new sort of carrot, since we couldn't fund, in terms of offering a manuscript. And then it also offered a nice model for how to let the group work together. And so we decided to blend these 2 existing models into something that worked pretty well, I think, for us.
So I'll kind of dive into the details of how we approached this particular FLC and the challenges that Shannon just shared. So we decided to focus on doing some sort of evidence synthesis. So an evidence synthesis is when you gather research based on a certain topic, and these can be really helpful when you think about trying to understand the breadth and depth of a topic, which is something that can really benefit SoTL. Some of you might have heard of systematic reviews, which are very popular in the health sciences. There are a whole range of different types of evidence synthesis. So we have scoping reviews, systematic reviews, different types of analysis where you're gathering that information and really kind of critiquing the value of it, or just gathering it and seeing what kind of gaps there are. So like I said, there's a range of different types of evidence synthesis. Picking the best one can take some conversation and trying to decide what your goals are, what your timeline is, those types of things. So we weren't sure well, let me say this. We thought we were going to do a systematic review. I'll talk a little bit later why we decided to change to a scoping review, but we thought some sort of evidence synthesis would really be helpful for this project because it would identify knowledge gaps and help kind of drive SoTL research forward without relying on kind of the traditional methods of SoTL research, which require being in the classroom, studying students, those types of things, which were not options during the pandemic. So I want to talk a little bit about our research team. We have Dr. Shannon Sipes, who is on this presentation with me. Her role as the faculty developer and SoTL program director meant that she helped kind of lead the FLC and this project forward. We have Dr. Krisha Tyagaraja, who is a senior lecturer in the School of Public Health, and her areas of expertise focus on nutrition and dietetics. And she's really considered the disciplinary expert in this project. And then there were two librarians, myself and my colleague, Alyssa Denneler. Our roles are different, even though we're both librarians. Alyssa is more of what you might consider a functional librarian. So she's not connected to any schools or departments, but she offers support in many other ways. And some of those include research, reference, helping with citation management, software stuff. And then I am a subject librarian, so I work directly with specific disciplines in schools, mostly focused on the neurohealth sciences aspect, so psychology, optometry, nursing, and speech language and hearing sciences. So we both add a little bit something different to the team. So our roles and responsibilities within the FLC, I think, are really interesting to look at. So Shannon's role is not only the project coordinator, so she planned our meetings, she facilitated, took many of the notes, but she also provided SoTL expert insights to this project. So like I said, she curated a lot of the FLC materials, prepped the meetings, and really informed which direction within SoTL we could or should go. And then Krisha, as I mentioned before, is the disciplinary expert and teaching instructor. So she really informed the project in terms of what area within nutrition and dietetics we should focus on. And she provided her background and area of expertise in teaching to really hone in on a topic or area of interest for us to move forward in. And then Alyssa and I did kind of the traditional library role of evidence synthesis. So we harvested search terms for a literature review, we compiled resources, and we also supplemented some of the FLC materials based on different trainings that we attended to help kind of fill in the knowledge gaps that overall this team was trying to move forward in conducting a scoping review. So I wanted to share what our research question was here. So our research question is, what are the pedagogical approaches currently used in undergraduate programs in dietetics, nutrition, and food science in North America? So as you can see, this research question is really broad, and it can also be tailored to different disciplines, different schools. And so we really want to emphasize that these types of reviews can get very specific and highlight a pedagogical technique or a certain methodology, but it can also be very broad. So if you're not knowing where to start, sometimes going big is the best bet. We also thought that this format of a virtual FLC and drawing upon different experts within different areas of academia really fostered an environment for learning from others and building on existing literature. So I kind of talked about that in our roles and responsibilities, but each one of us added a different piece to the project, which I think is really interesting and valuable. And then the final piece that I think is helpful to think about is we have undergraduate student who is joining our project, and they're going to help with the evaluation of the literature that we gather. And so we opted for an upperclassman or a graduate student. We ended up getting a senior who's interested in going to grad school for nutrition and dietetics. And this is a really great opportunity for them to understand what some of those pedagogical methods are related to their field, get experience doing an evidence synthesis. In this case, it's a scoping review. And so really adding one more potential expert into the project. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we opted for a scoping review rather than a systematic review. As I mentioned earlier, we initially thought we were going to do a systematic review, and then we realized based on our project goals that a scoping review actually fit our criteria better. So from this left column here, you can see that we wanted to identify different types of available evidence in a given field. In this case, it's nutrition and dietetics. We really wanted to clarify key concepts and definitions in the literature. And kind of most importantly, we wanted to identify and analyze knowledge gaps. And you can also think of this as a precursor for systematic review. So we weren't interested in really analyzing the research that we gathered. We really wanted to see what topics were being covered, and that can facilitate a more robust systematic review in the future. But ultimately, a scoping review really checked all of our boxes, and it's more a better method for people who maybe aren't familiar with rigor and experience of conducting a systematic review. So this was kind of a nice way to start this project without knowing all the nitty-gritty details. So finally, Shannon and I want to wrap up and share some key takeaways, some things for you all to think about if you're interested in hosting this kind of FLC.
Yeah, to recap before we move on to what worked, right? We had a topical-based FLC. The topic was using evidence synthesis as a method to learn to do SoTL in a fairly unstructured FLC because we were all novices to some extent and experts to some extent. And so we were collaboratively building the content for the learning community. And we used the ICWG structure of a mix of synchronous and asynchronous work across this extended period of time. And we are about 12 months into it. So we still do have more work to do and so it will take essentially that 18 to 24 month time frame that the ICWG model follows. But I think that it was really successful in a couple of ways. It allowed us the flexibility and creativity to meet the needs of faculty in this really strange time, adapting models that work and have proven to work in other formats. It let us think about what an expert might look like in a partnership. So you notice we had a disciplinary expert, we had librarians, which for any type of synthesis are pretty critical. We had my expertise as an academic developer and SoTL person, right? And so if it was a different topic, we could maybe rethink what those experts and partners might look like in the same framework. And then it also really made us think a lot about who is part of this community of inquiry, who gets to participate. So Amy mentioned we also added a student. And so we've got a lot of different perspectives coming into the group and all learning together. the geography is no longer a constraint. Our student actually is in China this semester and will hopefully be back in the States in the spring, but we worked from different cities, different countries. And we were really able to blend the synchronous and asynchronous collaboration, especially as people become more comfortable with Zoom and working in Google Spaces and other shared areas that we typically don't think of or are not our go-tos when we are physically in the same space. And so blending these models really helped us to create a fulfilling FLC experience in a very uncommon time. But then there's some things that didn't work.
Yeah, so we wanted to share our lessons learned. So the first and probably biggest one is to be mindful of your timeline. So initially we thought we would be able to do the entire scoping review within the FLC 12-month, 18-month timeline. And it took more time figuring out which evidence synthesis method made the most sense, really identifying what research question we wanted to ask, partners that also could fill in as experts, and yeah, the time to learn the software and tools needed. So we're using tools such as Covidence, which is used to screen the articles, Zotero, which is the citation management software. Luckily, Alyssa is the expert in that, but using it in a different way than maybe we're traditionally used to as librarians. So that also took some work. We also collaborated with a medical librarian at one of our regional campuses where the medical school is located. So she really took us under her wing and mentored us in terms of crafting our search terms and those types of things. So yeah, it took much more time than we thought it would, but it was definitely a worthwhile endeavor. And then, Shannon, is there anything else you want to add to the lessons learned? I know time and being able to take time to train both the student and also ourselves in this particular type of method. Anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much it. We have the giant turtle because I said really all of our things that we learned is literally everything went much more slowly than we initially anticipated, which is not a negative thing, but definitely something learned. So we have just a few minutes, but what questions do you have right now? If you think of them later, Amy's got our contact information up there, so you can definitely contact us. But do you have questions currently? And I suppose you can either type them or unmute. Let's see, Irma raised her hand. So yes, raise your hand and then you can unmute as well.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I really like how you made the most of the situation we were all in the last 18 months. So my compliments for that. I was wondering, because you talk about a faculty learning community, and a community is more than only collaborating with each other. It's also about finding each other, and it seems to me that would have been the most difficult thing to do in this lockdown situation. So I was really wondering what you did and how you approached to really obtain this community feeling with the people that were joining this initiative.
Yeah, so I can answer that. The faculty learning communities are run out of our teaching center. And so we, much like the ICWG model, we have sort of an abstract of what the community is going to be about. And then faculty members will apply. We will choose some people, they get together in the group. And then really the first few meetings are spent getting to know each other and coming to this shared understanding and building some of that community. I actually did 2 topical FLCs using this model. One was this systematic review, and one was on critical reflection as a methodology. And what happened in practice is that critical reflection group, community group, really made 0 progress on the topic, even though it was topically based, but served much, much more as really a community of support through the pandemic. It was all untenured women of color, unintentionally, and the group did not meet its stated purpose, but really I think fulfilled a more meaningful purpose for those members in that community.
I'll also add that librarians at IU are considered faculty. We're faculty librarians. And so it also allowed us to share what our structure looks like for promotion and tenure and really kind of come together and work on a project in very different ways. And so that also kind of established us as experts in a way too, which I think is really helpful because academics don't often think about librarians and that we're researchers and we have skills that can bolster the work that you're doing, bolster the teaching that you're doing. And so I think that's an interesting kind of addition to this particular FLC.
Great, thank you both.
We're at 12:30, so if folks need to leave, I want to acknowledge that, although there's about, I think, 10 minutes of passing time in between this section and what's happening next. But I will say, even after this chat closes, you will still be able to access this question section in the chat, so you can continue to discuss on this session page if you want to. And then, of course, please do reach out to the speakers with more questions. This was a really excellent session. Thank you both so much.